All right, here we go. Welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be having a very interesting conversation with Paul Higgins. So, Paul is a business mentor, a podcaster, and a published author who helps coaches and consultants build online businesses to fund lifestyles. Before starting his own business, Paul worked at Coca-Cola for 18 years, where he served in various senior roles such as marketing director and general manager. Apart from that, he has also got experience in leading large sales teams. Paul has had a tremendous amount of experience in account based selling, creating channel strategies, and integrating acquisitions. In his previous role, he was the director for a $700 million unit. Paul is also sitting on advisory boards for 10 to $50 million range companies and has mentored over 271 business owners. His customers range from micro businesses to multi-billion-dollar companies and come from diverse backgrounds. Paul is an author of the book called Build, Live, Give, and has a podcast that goes by the same name. When it comes to hobbies, Paul loves playing golf and is an avid follower of the sport. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Fantastic. Great to be here, Manuj.
Awesome. So I had a pleasure to speaking to you just about a couple of hours ago on your podcast, which was a fantastic experience. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. How was your tenure at Coca-Cola, and what did you learn, and how did you move from that significant position to what you're doing right now?
Yeah, well, I had a fantastic childhood, brought up in country Australia.
Mhm.
So as most Canadians and Americans would picture, kangaroos in the paddock and all of those things. And at 18, I really, there was one day in my life that completely changed everything. And I walked out of a doctor's and looked at my mum in the eye and realised that I'd just been diagnosed with the same condition that she had,
Oh.
and her father had died when she was 12, and it's called polycystic kidney disease.
Oh.
And it basically cysts outgrow your kidneys and you lose kidney function. And we can go into what's happened later. But that really turned me into, well, there's some things I can't change. I know that I'm going to have kidney failure at some point, but I can do everything I can to control what I can. And I've decided to become high performing. That led me to go and work for one of the biggest and most high performing companies in the world, which was Coca-Cola.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, life is unpredictable like that, right? Something happens which really forms the trajectory of the next several decades. So yeah, we'll go into that deeper later. So at Coca-Cola, you worked there for 18 years, just a iconic brand. So what kind of experiences did you gain there when you started working at Coca-Cola? Any lessons, any aha moments that you can share in terms of how they work and grow their brand?
Yeah, look, there's so many over 18 years, but I think there's a couple that really come to mind. One was just the Coca-Cola was brilliant at consumer insights. So, I know it's become a buzz term now, but, when I started in the 90s, early 90s, it was still in their DNA that go and research consumers before you launch a product. Now, they got a couple of things wrong in their past. One of the biggest was launching the new Coke versus old Coke, but it turned out okay. But they were heavy into consumer research, and I think that's brilliant for any entrepreneur now, is to go and make sure that you've had product market fit before you tip a lot of marketing into it. So that was one thing. The other was just the customer delight. So they really believed in, how do we improve a customer's business, and then we will benefit from that. So a lot of businesses, and I think even to today, people sell their product to benefit shareholders, but don't really consider what's in the customer's odds. And, we were using data back in the early 2000s to look at, if you look at Burger King as a chain, we were getting all of their data and saying, look, this is mining their data, looking at how we could find them more profit. So then they didn't have to come and look for us to lower our price. They could find it across all of their products. So I think they were very innovative, very early on things like that. And then the last is around and just that customer focus or client focus was also around the way that they sold, because they sold based on value, not based on price. And then the last one was around high-performing teams. They were brilliant at developing teams. They had very sophisticated ways of doing that, but they also brought in the best people. So if we needed help, we would go and get the best people in the world to help us with that. And that's what came with 150 odd years worth of experience and a lot of cash.
Wow.
But that has stayed with me now. So those three lessons of really understanding your consumer, really making sure that you're getting value for your customers, so you're getting them a result. It's not about you, it's about them. And the last one is building high-performing teams and bringing experts in when you need to break through a certain stage of growth. I think those three things is what I learned at the Coke company, and they've stayed to now how I run my business.
That's awesome. Yeah, market research is absolutely important. Like I've learned that in many startups where they get excited about a particular technology, which is a very cool technology, very innovative technology. But then in their zeal, they forget to say, okay, who is going to pay for it and what problem are we solving with that? So that's absolutely essential. Now, I come from a software and IT background, so it's kind of easier, a little bit easier to do that market research. But how do you do that for a drink? Or, how do you do that for a physical product, especially in 1990s? Like, did you go to where people congregated and shared some new tastes of Coke, or how did that all work?
Yeah, look, it was multifaceted, but the key thing is they were running qualitative and quantitative. So the qualitative was around focus groups, so getting people to come in, and we would shop with consumers. Yeah. And then the quantitative part was using all of the data that they tracked through all their media buying agencies and everything, and tracking the behaviors. So it was quite sophisticated. But I know I was fortunate enough to launch products like Coke Zero, which ended up being a global success. When we launched that, there was a lot of in situ situations where we'd sort of look at consumers, their behaviors, etc. So look, it was they were the world's best, and I was lucky to be on forums where we'd have Nike, depends where you are in the world. We'd have other massive brands, and I think the Coke company was always at the pinnacle of how they collected their consumer insights.
That's great. And one thing you brought up was value to the customer, and I believe Coca-Cola is in a slightly unique position where they're distributing the products through their distributors or large customers, but the target is actually the end consumer, the person who's going to open up that bottle of Coke and enjoy it. So yes. How did you balance these two aspects? Because your customer is somebody else who's cutting the check, and actual consumer is somebody else.
Yeah, look, and to be honest, so the Coke company's I think it's the largest franchise in the world. So you got the Coke company, so their key role is to market the product, and then you've got the bottlers, the partners. Their key role is to do everything else effectively: sales, distribution. And it was a marriage that was always saying that it was going to break up, right? So it was constantly arguing, but that tension, I think, is what made it so strong, because often when you've got it all under the one company, it's easier for someone just to say, well, this is what we're doing. But in the Coke system, you actually had to convince all the bottlers around the world that was the best decision. So they had to get really good consumer data and have really good evidence to say, this is why we're doing this, because otherwise the bottlers would push back and say, hey, no, we don't want to do that. So I think that tension, which was always there, and there was a love-hate relationship, I think that's what brought around the power of the Coke system, is that you did have that tension between, ultimately, which was tension between marketing and sales that exists in a lot of companies.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Actually, I never thought about it that way, because even our governments work like that. If a government gets elected, which is universally a single party system, then things fall apart because there's nobody to raise any concern. But if you have a dual party system or strong opposition, you got to answer those people, right?
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. And so working as you said, they have large budgets, excellent people. going from that environment to starting your own business, like what are kind of the adjustments that you had to make? Like, obviously I think starting a new business, you obviously cannot afford a budget like Coca-Cola. So what are some of the things that you had to change for your business when you started off?
Yeah, look, I think the first is that it's all you, right?
Mhm.
So, I had written into my employment contract that I always had an executive assistant. So I was very fortunate to have that and a team. So all of a sudden it's just you, right? So I went from this, team of 50 people supporting me to me. So I think that was the biggest adjustment first. And I think the key thing there, and I truly believe this, is that you should have a computer, you should have a phone, and you should have a virtual assistant if you're running your own business, right? There are so many things you can do, but you shouldn't be doing. So I think it's critical around that, which led me to actually start my own outsourcing company based on that experience. So I think that was the first thing. I think the second thing is that, you just can't rely on a brand name anymore. So, I used to walk into a room and I'd do everything to say that I didn't work for Coca-Cola, because someone had, want product for their local school fete, or someone would want a job, or someone wanted to know all about the secret formula. So I'd always say, if they finally got out where I worked, I'd say, yes, I worked at Coca-Cola, I was a forklift driver. And they go, oh, okay, forklift driver. And they'd sort of just move on. So that was the second thing. I'd walk into rooms and all of a sudden it was me. I wasn't behind this big brand. So what value could I give to people? So that was a hard lesson in sales, because at Coca-Cola was always a challenge because you had to sell more, but people knew what you did. Whereas I walked in a room and I didn't know what I did, let alone convincing someone else to know. So I think that was the second thing. And then the third thing was around who I could trust to help me build my business. At Coke, as I said, we had the best people on the planet. So I always had such a high standard for what people would deliver. Whereas for me running my own business, I just thought people would do what they said they were going to do. And I just was disappointed and let down too many times. And, two classic examples come to mind. One was where someone said they were going to do my R&D work. And in short, it ended up with the tax department here in Australia coming and saying that they'd done the wrong thing. If I couldn't provide the data to back it up, I'd have to pay them back all the grant. And of course, the company vanished overnight and took all the data with them. So, there's that, and a video company that, was going to do an online course for me, and they disappeared. So, so what I've done now, I've created, I think at the moment, I'm about up to 1,700 experts in the world that if you say to me, hey, Paul, I need to find 3 people to do Facebook ads, or 3 people to help me with my design, or 3 people, whatever the topic is for service-based business owners, I can go and say, you can trust these people, because that was, by far the biggest impact on profit to me was picking the wrong experts to help me grow.
Definitely. And so, those are really good lessons. And it's great to learn those in an environment like Coke. I worked with Microsoft and some other significant names, and the way they do business is really different, and you get a unique experience. But as you mentor other businesses, and some of them are smaller businesses, a lot of those people come from these large corporates, right? And what I find, unlike you, a lot of people, they get stuck in those ways. It's hard for them to let go of the corporate ways. So have you dealt with such situations, and how do you mentor them? How do you bring them from that world to this new world of running a small business?
Yeah, look, I know this sounds fairly simple, but it's, what are your goals? So what are you looking to achieve, and where are you? Right. So that simple gap analysis. And, like you said, most people I work with are incredibly intelligent. They know that something's not working, but it's hard to see the label from within inside the jar. So, what I do is just say, well, look, we've got to change things if that's where you want. And to me, money in business only funds your lifestyle. Right. So whatever that lifestyle wants to be, if you want to travel the world, I know you love to travel the world, other people love to give back, whatever it is, but the business funds that. So to get the business humming, you need to make some changes. And that's where I come in and say, okay, well, look, we've got 4 pillars and 29 components under that we know has been proven to drive a service-based business. So, you've got a choice. You can continue to do it yourself, which, you're telling me it's not where you'd like it to be. You know where you want to be. So let's go through this structure so you get left assets that help you to get there. And I think most people are smart enough to know that they want that. I can't help everybody, but the people that know and are willing to let go, that they're the people that achieve that end goal.
That's awesome. And so let's also talk about the cultural context. You are in Australia, you grew up in Australia, you're doing business with entrepreneurs all over the world. Have you found anything different or interesting the way that you do business in Australia versus North America or Europe or any other part of the world for that matter?
Yeah, look, definitely. And I think it's, yes, there's country differences, but I think there's also differences by state within.
Yeah.
So I know you're in Canada, but the East versus the West Coast are very different.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the same thing in America. So, I had someone on my podcast the other day, and they were from Texas, and they had very strong values. And I said, look, there's no cursing or no swearing in my show, and they said I would never curse or swear. Whereas if I go to someone in New York and say that, they're like, sorry, I can't come on your podcast. It's not going to happen. So I think there is definitely cultural differences. And I find, especially in America, I find that they'll normally say yes to something. They've got a lot more entrepreneurial drive, and they tend to want to do more self-improvement. I think, that's where the self-improvement industry sort of grew up. That's where it's continued to thrive. And I think most Americans will say yes, whereas in Australia, as an example, we're very more conservative, and we'll say, no, I need proof that everything's going to work before I'll say yes. Oh. So I think from North America versus Australia, I think that's probably the biggest cultural differences. But I think humans are all humans. I think our sense of humor is very similar. I love the fact that I interview people all over the world. I've got clients all over the world, and I don't really have to change who I am. I've got to look at little unique nuances when we're selling. But overall, I think good people are good people no matter where they live.
That's for sure. Now that leads me to the next question, because you're a LinkedIn expert who's got some like real killer strategies, and I was really amazed at your work. And you've leveraged LinkedIn to build the business, and you're helping other people build their businesses using LinkedIn. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the importance of networking and what it means for businesses.
Yeah, so if I just take back a second, I spoke at the start of the show about, my condition, polycystic kidney disease. Well, in 2018, I had to have one of those kidneys removed. It was about the size of a soccer ball because I was at 6% kidney function. If you can think of your worst hangover, or you haven't slept for 3 days, that's how I felt all the time. It wasn't great, but I continued to work. And my best mate gave me his kidney in February of 2019. Absolutely life-changing. So if you see I was down to about 60 kilos at my worst health, and now I'm 77, 78. It was just, I cannot tell you the difference it's brought me. But the reason I say that is because finally my doctor said, you can go out and promote yourself, because I didn't want to promote myself if I wasn't going to be around, or I didn't want to let people down. Right? So finally I said, no, look, Paul, you're all good. And I can say, Manuj, that was one of the scariest moments of my life. I'm like, okay, I've got no excuses anymore. I've got to get out there. Long story short, I doubled down on LinkedIn, and in 6 months, most of it being done from a hospital bed, in 6 months, I got 1.2 million views. And most importantly, I got 112 new clients just from implementing a LinkedIn strategy. So it's completely changed the trajectory of my service-based business. And that's why I'm so excited to help other people.
That's amazing. I've read your story, very touching, and it just shows persistence and hard work. It can work wonders, and not to mention you have some great friends who are able to do what they did for you. So that's amazing. Going back to the point of networking, once again, I have been a very introverted person coming from technology, and a lot of people, a lot of CEOs, a lot of entrepreneurs, they think generally that if they build a very good product or a very good service, then things will just take care of themselves. They don't really believe in networking, or just because of their personal nature, they are very shy and whatnot. So what is the impact of networking or lack thereof on a business?
Yeah, look, as I said back before, it's meeting those personal goals and not as often led by you hitting your sales numbers. And I think networking and virtual networking that we're all doing at the moment through the power of LinkedIn, I think is one of the best ways to achieve those sales. And for me, so we run a community of around 70 thought leaders around the world. And to me, there's 3 key things we've learned. So one is you've got to have a great profile. How many times you go to meet someone, the first thing you do, and actually their profile will rank above their website in most cases, right, on Google. Yeah. So you go to their profile and you look at it and you think, hang on, that's I'm not quite sure what this person does, right? So the first thing is to have a really clear profile. And I've got a download. It's blgdownload.com is some killer tips on your profile. So that's the first thing. The next is posting, right? And we spoke about it in the podcast interview we did earlier, but people want to know that you're an expert, and people want to know that you're giving value, right? People are sick to death of just outreach without context. And, one of the biggest things to like, know, and trust you is, well, are you putting out good content in the world, right? And is that getting engagement? So we strongly believe in posting. There's a secret formula that we've worked out to make sure that you get greater reach. So, we'll get anywhere between 5 and 30,000 views of posts. So we've worked that out so that you can get people, because there's people that directly engage, but there's a lot of lurkers that will follow you, and then eventually they'll contact you, right? And as we used to say at Coke, 50% of the marketing works, 50% doesn't. You don't know which one. So always market. And then the last one is the possibilities, which I know your platform is bringing it at doing, but it's then you can reach out. And when you do reach out and you have good natural conversations with people, they will look at your profile and they'll look at your posting. So I think at the moment you've got to work those 3 Ps to make sure that the virtual networking is alive and well and it's working for you.
That's awesome. Now, you explained it very well, and I think all those components are needed. But again, whenever I have talked to entrepreneurs or even executives, I mean, it sounds like a lot of work. And I mean, as we know, really it is. So how do we convince them? How can we convince them to do this work? Or do you also help them actually take that work off their plate and do it for them?
Yeah, look, great. So let's make an even split, right? Let's say sales is 50% the strategy work that only you can do and 50% admin that someone else can do. Right. So let me just take you through a little bit of what I do with LinkedIn. So with LinkedIn, I write the content, but as far as posting, putting it into a Chrome extension that we use to boost the posts, all of that is done by my team. Okay. So then the comments, so I'll comment back with people on post, but people that comment and like on me, my team will reach out to them. So it'll be using the exact same words that I use, but they'll be doing that on my behalf. Right. Then the leads. So a lot of the messaging with the outbound, we use a tool for that. We're looking at your tool at the moment, but we will do that. And my team completely run that. So for me, most of the activity is happening by my team. And when I say my team, these are young individuals that are at the start of their career. Some are in Colombia, some are in the Maldives, some are in the Philippines. So they're really smart. And at the moment, they haven't quite found their career, but they can help me and they can learn a lot. So they get the benefit of that. I get the benefit of using them because they're, really smart. And then what I do is spend my time on the actual conversations when it gets to a call, right? So, yes, there seems a lot of work in totality, but if you break it down into that 50-50, then it becomes quite manageable.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Delegation is something that even seasoned executives, they sometimes they cannot trust other people. So The way that you described it almost sounds like an assembly line of all these activities that you put together. So that's great. Now let's talk about your podcast, which I had the pleasure of being on.
Yeah.
So, when did you start it? What is the purpose? And why do entrepreneurs start this podcast? What is podcasting all about?
Yeah, look, great question. And I think I just released an episode saying, why have a podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I give some of the details. But look, I started, well, I'm up to, let's say, roughly 240 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Depends when this goes live. But I started, 3 years ago, and I love having conversations. So to me, you've got to create content. As you said before, you've got to create content for people to find you. You just can't rely on a great product. So I believed in content. And to be honest, I'm okay at writing, but I don't love it. What I love is this. I love conversations. So I thought, well, isn't it easy for me to have a conversation and get someone to turn that into a blog post for SEO value? So I get to do what I love, which is interview people around the world, and I still get all the value of giving content, valuable content to others. So that was sort of the reason. But the other thing is that I'm a podcast fanatic myself. So I've always been a learner. I know when you were on my show, you talked about, you're a voracious learner as well. Now, I used to read, but as I got poorer health with my condition, I couldn't keep awake.
I see.
Right. So I'd have marks on my head from, I couldn't use the iPad because it'd smash my head. I'd always have books falling on my head. So I realized that if I was doing something active and listening, I could consume knowledge. And now I'm up to about 2.5 times speed, sometimes 3 times speed. I listen to podcasts, and I just loved it. It was like, every time I moved home, I had to move all my books. Whereas now, I've just got on my phone, it's cloud-based, I've got it wherever I go. So it was a fascination of me wanting to learn and the medium, which I loved, and researching people. And the other was, it was something that was natural to me, which was doing what we're doing now. So those two things together led to my podcast.
That's great. Can you share any insights, anything that you remember you picked it up from a podcast and applied it and got benefit? I mean, is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that collection of experts, right? So as I said, those 1,700 people, most of those have come from listening to an expert. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Airtable.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So I categorize every podcast I've ever listened to. So the value that I've got out of it, the link, etc. So I constantly use that information to help other people. So for me, that's one of the huge benefits of podcasting, is that I get to collect all that knowledge and use it. So I think that's great. The other thing of having a podcast, one of the greatest benefits is in LinkedIn, and your branded outreach, sometimes it's hard to have that bridge. It's like, how do I take someone from connecting, understanding what they do, to get them into a call? Because there's a lot of people that aren't like you and don't do it as well as you. So therefore, people are very suspicious of people that are sending messages. So for me, if you can give them value first, I think that's a great way of getting to know them. So a podcast interview is a brilliant way to do that. So now when I do outreach for some people, I say, would you like to talk about whether you'd be a great fit for being on the podcast? And that leads to a conversation where I can add value to them. They might end up working with me. They might become a guest. So I think that's another key reason for having a podcast.
That's awesome. And it seems like you're really good at organizing your work and sort of, systemizing everything, even to the extent of you're categorizing your podcast listens. So that's great. But on the contrary, I suffer from chaos myself in my business, but I will say I'm not that bad, but I've seen like real chaotic businesses where nobody knows what the heck is going on, and, and they're just shooting from the hip every day. Have you seen anything like that in the business world?
Yeah, look, I do, and I think some businesses or some business people that are just brilliant at what they do, and they've got ideas that are that world changing. So I don't think it's in confidence, but I did speak to someone the other day that talked about Elaine Moss. And, apparently he is brilliant, which we all know, but his management style and the way his businesses are run are absolutely chaotic. Now, this is third-hand information. I haven't experienced myself, so I'm sure Alan listens to this. So if he is, I hope we're not misquoting you. But, I think he's successful. Will he be successful as he could be if he was better organised and people knew what they're doing? I don't know. The world's yet to find out. But this person's saying that it's definitely limiting. So I think there is. And I work with a lot of people that are brilliant, and they get to a point where it's all in their mind. It's all around them. And I'm like, that's a huge risk. Like, you'll have, my model is always to earn my money in my own business and then to put it into assets that are outside of me so that it's protected, right? So it's sort of generating the cash to invest wiser. But for a lot of people, they don't take money out of the business. They just keep pouring effort in there. And I'm like, but the risk is that it's all around you. So what happens to you? Like, I had to sit on a dialysis machine for 5 months, 3 days a week, 4.5 hours. So I know what it's like to be all of a sudden not able to run the business as you would like. So I do think having the right systems is so critical. And the great thing is you don't have to do it yourself. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think, it's just too hard because it's quicker for me to do it myself and I don't want to do it. But now there's brilliant software like Dub is a software we use where you can record things. I know AI is getting a lot better. So there's ways that you can actually have other people build your processes and systems. Like for me, I come in and build sales systems for people. I've got all the IP. I make it really easy to build it. So you don't have to be in the weeds on that, but you do have to be able to recognize that your business won't achieve your goals unless you do it, and that you've got to get others to come in and support you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now we are all going through, this pandemic experience, and Australia has had some of the toughest lockdowns. How do you think this situation of working remotely or under lockdown, how is it affecting the business overall, and how should entrepreneurs tackle this?
Yeah, look, I think for most entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs is a big term, right? So if I'm looking mainly at people that are sort of that 1 to 10 million in service-based businesses. So I think for most of them, they were there already, but I do think they had some people in the office because it sort of created some comfort. And look, I think, I'm nearly 50. I think for our age group or the people that are watching now, I think you're used to a little bit more command and control within an environment. Like at Coke, you all had to be in the office. Yeah. But I think now the opportunity is that you can really challenge that model. And I think for most people, they're going to realize that working for home is fantastic. I've been forced to do it. I've been doing it for the last 9 years. It's great. My wife works for a large corporate. She's now working at home and hasn't been happier. She manages a day. She gets great results, but she might go for a ride in the middle of the day. She goes a walk in the afternoon. There's not the travel time. So there's a lot of benefits. So, look, I do think there'll be a blend on the other side of this, that some people will still want to be in an office, and I completely get that. But I do think the choices are a lot broader now. And used to say, let's jump on a Zoom call to my corporate mates. And they're like, what's Zoom? Like, I'm not going to jump on a Zoom call. Like, just call me, Whereas now it's just become second nature. So I think there's a lot of things that are the downside of COVID. But if I look at the positives, I think this has fast-tracked what will equal a better lifestyle for most of us.
For sure. And what about like finding customers? Because as you know, especially for B2B customers, there was a lot of the scouting needed, like, meeting people in networking events, conferences, things of that nature. All that is, right now at a pause, and I don't know whether it'll come back. So what effect will that have on businesses?
Yeah, look, it's a great point. Look, I know that, so there's large groups like EO, for example, Entrepreneurs Organisation. I was interested in going into that. One of the reasons I didn't, because it wasn't global and it was the same 12 people every week in a physical location. So that didn't suit me at the time. Whereas now they've gone to virtual, and from all reports of the people that I've spoken to that are in it are really enjoying it. So I think a lot of networking now, I know BNI, which is, one of the biggest networking groups around the globe, I know that is running virtual now, and it seems to be working quite well. So I do think there's opportunities to network. There will be some people that always want that face-to-face communication. So I get that, and that will happen. But I also do think that this will bring about also a huge boom in technology. Like Zoom's great, Microsoft Teams is great, but let's face it, like it's not as good as it could be. So I do think that, Silicon Valley, startups will start delivering technology where it'll be the exact same as you being in a room, but you won't really know it, that you're in a room together. So I don't think that's far away. And the last point I'll say is that I spoke to someone this on the weekend that's a very good friend of Tony Robbins. He was actually his first Tony worked for him when he first got his start, and it was really interesting to hear Tony Robbins at 18 and what he was like. Yeah. But he now, does 5,000 person virtual events, and Tony's sort of saying to him, well, I don't know if I'll go back to in-person events. Like, the technology and what I can do and the convenience and, all of that is, I think I'll be running virtual events post-COVID.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of people are shifting towards virtual, but some people may want to have that tangible sort of touch, and yeah, innovation never stops. It'll keep going. But to bring it back, it is all the more reason to embrace LinkedIn, embrace what you're doing, embrace virtual networking, and leverage these tools that are available to continue to grow no matter what the situation is out there, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, I suppose the thing I didn't mention at Coca-Cola at the start is that, they were always automating, especially was all through the business, in particular in manufacturing, right? So they were always looking to, produce a can of Coke less than what they did the day before, effectively. And I think for us, it's a great opportunity to still keep the relationship part of sales, but use the technology to have more meaningful conversations. And I think that's where your platform's a great example of that, where, you're still selling to humans, right? And I think we got a bit crazy with marketing automation, where it went over the top, where, we forgot who was on the other end. It was like just, we were so focused on automating all the steps, etc. We forgot, well, who's actually receiving it. And it was the same in email. Remember when email first came in, you used to get 300-400 of them and everyone sent it. And I'm like, I used to say to someone, or someone would say, I'm getting too many emails. I'm like, okay, how many are you sending? They would go, what does that mean? I said, well, the amount you're sending will contribute to how many you get back for starters. Like if everyone sends a lot, you're going to get a lot, right? Yeah. And the same with marketing automation, whereas I think at the moment, there's people definitely want a human connection in a virtual world. They want for people to really understand them and sell to them and not give them some automated system that is not specific. So I think if you blend those two, so if you take your approach, which is similar to mine, which is very much human-based relationship, and power that by the automation and the tools, I think you're in the right spot to really succeed now and when we come out the other side of COVID.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a very, very interesting conversation, and you dropped a lot of value, taught a lot about LinkedIn. Not only LinkedIn, but how to actually work LinkedIn without being spammy. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us how people can reach out to you?
Yeah. So like I said, to get that profile tips, you can go to blgdownload.com. Our main website is paulhigginsmentoring.com. And there's a quiz. So when I spoke before about, people that are moving from doing it all themselves into actually creating what we call a profit machine. So if you want to go from a sweatbox to a profit machine, we've got a little quiz for you. So you just go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/quiz, and there's a quiz there for you to fill out.
Awesome. That's great. So we'll put those links in the show notes so that people can reach out easily.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Manuj. Really enjoyed being on the show, and thanks for being a wonderful guest on my show as well.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.